sound. Good evening and welcome to Upper Dublin News Network. I'm Michael Cummins.
And I'm Samantha Singer. Our first story this evening is that the Wade dump fire from 1978 is going on trial. On the industrial riverbank of Chester, Pennsylvania, a huge fire had begun with multiple explosions, killing about 30 people at the scene and leaving 45 in critical conditions. Roughly 200 people were exposed to these chemicals, and about 50 of these people were diagnosed with cancers, vascular and neurovascular disorders, and kidney failure. Several years after the incident, the site was filled with tons of toxic chemicals that were illegally dumped for years. The origin of this fire continues to be a mystery to this day.
What is known so far is that the site that housed Eastern Rubber Reclaiming was used as a dump site for chemicals such as cyanide, PCBs, benzene, toluene, and many others by a company owned by Melvin Wade. These chemicals were dumped until 1978 when an intense fire destroyed one building and damaged two others that were used for storing and holding the chemicals I mentioned earlier. An estimated 3 million gallons of chemicals were stored in these buildings. After the fire, only about 1,500,000 gallons were left along with the remains of the buildings, barrels, and ruined earth. The groundwater was contaminated due to the dumping and fire with chemicals such as lead, mercury, chromium, and arsenic that threaten the lives of any residents, workers, and wildlife of the area.
Our first interview today is with a man named Daniel Elder, a police officer on duty during the Wade dump fire. We will now go to our correspondent, Matt Ledove, who will be interviewing Daniel Elder.
Hello, I'm Matthew Ledove. I'm here with Mr. Elder. Now, you were a police officer on duty during the incident, right?
Yes.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
When the fire occurred, I was 28 years old and I'd already been patrolling the site for about 5 years. I continued patrolling the site for another 5 years after the fire. At age 34, I was diagnosed with endocarcinoma, which is the forming of tumors of epithelial tissue on my cecum and colon, which basically means that I had a monstrous tumor blocking up my large intestine.
So, Mr. Elder, do you believe that any of the chemicals used had caused these tumors?
Yes, I do.
And do you remember anything from that day?
Yes, I do. Everyone arrived on scene to see a huge 3-acre fire. We all knew it was a tire dump site, but the smoke that we had seen was more acrid than any tire fire we had ever seen. Waves of firefighters ran in to attack the flames, but we were driven back due to exploding barrels. My fellow officers and I, and the firefighters, and the paramedics were showered in unknown chemicals shortly after the explosions.
I'm sorry that you had to go through this. I hope that you continue your recovery and get well soon. You're a true hero to the city of Chester. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today.
Our next interview is with Charles Greenhagen, a former foreman for Melvin Wade.
I'm here with Charles Greenhagen. Mr. Greenhagen, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to work with Melvin Wade and what kind of boss he was?
Oh, well, Mr. Wade was a terrible boss. He made lots of decisions without thinking of the consequences first, all in just his grand scheme to make money. He was kind of intimidating, too. He hired a lot of inexperienced workers who didn't really know what they were doing. And he had us all dump these tanks of chemicals that we didn't know what was in them. And all I remember is that there were thousands of gallons of it.
Wow, that's terrible. I cannot believe he kept that a secret for so long. Do you have any experiences where you remember that you were ever in danger?
All I remember is that work conditions were terrible. I was near a mix of nitric and sulfuric acid that emitted these red fumes, and I would lose the heels of my shoes from just walking near it. I even dropped a mouse in it once, and the mouse just disappeared. And to be honest, the only reason I became the foreman of the company is because the last foreman died after Wade lied to him. Wade told him that the tankers he was dealing with was just wastewater and nothing dangerous. And he was driving an entire trailer of these tankers. Trusting his boss, the foreman made a hole in the tanker, and later in the day, the whole trailer exploded and torched up, instantly killing him.
I'm truly saddened to hear that, Mr. Greenhagen. My deepest condolences go out to the foreman's family. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of this. Wade was a terrible boss. Thank you again for taking the time to meet with me.
It's not a problem.
For years after the fire, Melvin Wade would sneak onto the property to scavenge for junk he could sell. He spent less than a year in jail for his role in the dumping. He was used, and the people who used him are far more culpable, a judge said at his April 1981 sentencing.
As of 2008, Melvin Wade was living in an abandoned house in Chester.
Coming up next, we will hear about what DER official Bruce Bettler has to say about the Wade dump fire.
Hello, good morning. I'm here with Mr. Bruce Bettler. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. Can you please tell me what you saw when you inspected the Eastern Rubber Reclaiming Incorporation warehouse?
Now, what I saw was the most uncontrolled, horrendous facility I've ever seen. It was obvious that much of the material was volatile. Their shoes were steaming and smoking. I found many stacked leaking drums emitting fumes that sickened them. I wrote down words I saw stenciled on a few barrels like sodium copper cyanide, benzene, hexane, and many more.
Mr. Bettler, if you saw all this, why didn't you tell anyone?
It's okay, Samantha. Many people think the DER did not notify people of what was occurring there. For cleanup, the DER managed a long-term project that occurred after the fire. Tires, tankers, debris piles, and buildings were removed, decontaminated, and disposed of. Contaminated soil was removed to depths with acceptable levels of contamination or to the level of the water table. The site was leveled, filled, and graded, then covered with topsoil and seeded to minimize erosion. EPA, in conjunction with the state, deleted the site from the National Priorities List in 1989.
Well, I'm glad the site is all cleaned up now. Thank you again for taking the time to meet with me.
It's my pleasure.
After speaking with survivors and workers, we decided to reach out to the families of the victims, and one of those who stood out the most to us was the wife of Vincent Moose McLaughlin, who died at the age of 48 from thyroid cancer. Moose was one of the first responders on site at the Wade dump fire, and when we asked to interview his wife, she accepted but didn't want to be on camera. You can go whenever you're ready, Mrs. McLaughlin.
He was a hunk. He was a hunk. Is exactly what he was a hunk. There was a charisma about Vince. He had a charisma. He had a way about him. I don't know what it was. He was a big boy. He was a football player, but he was like a teddy bear. When my Patty was born, she only weighed 2 pounds 12 ounces, and that man went to the hospital every single day and every night to see that baby. That fire lasted a couple of days, so I remember him going the first time and then coming back and then going back again. What made me mad was that the city took no responsibility for this whatsoever, and it was their fault. These boys left their homes, left their families. They were going to work. Well, of course, with a firefighter or a police officer, you don't know whether they're coming home again. But this Wade dump fire was supposed to be a tire dump. There was not supposed to be toxic waste. I mean, I can remember the fellas saying that the barrels were just shooting up in the air. Do you believe that? And then the city doesn't take any responsibility whatsoever. And they have a mayor that says, yes, they did know. They knew a year before that was a toxic waste dump. Unbelievable. It was a tight-knit family. Really, I mean, it was. It was like a big family. And then you're sitting here watching them die bit by bit, one right after another. When they put him in the hole, your life goes with it. You don't have a life anymore. You don't have a life of him and you. It's gone. I mean, you were one. You were together. And all of a sudden, that one is taken away, and you're gone. It's gone. Your life is gone. Your children's father is gone. Your husband is gone. Your life is gone.
When you hear about the pain this has brought to someone's family, you can understand why they want to hold someone responsible.
The man most sought after for answers is none other than Melvin Wade, the man who owned and orchestrated the illegal dumping at the Tire Recycling Center. Mr. Wade has declined comment, but we managed to get an interview with the man who used to defend Wade.
I'm here today with one of Melvin Wade's former lawyers, Mr. Frank McCrone. So, Mr. McCrone, from what I hear, you had requested to be removed from the position of Melvin Wade's lawyer. Why is that?
Well, after working with Mr. Wade for a small amount of time, he had commented that we lacked a formidable defense. I know that we didn't have much to go on, being that all signs pointed to guilty, but I looked for whatever defense I could. He knew that we were bound to lose the case, so he continually requested to run a defense that was being tried because he was of the Negro race.
And now, would you say that Melvin Wade is a racist?
Yeah, I think I would. One of the reasons that Mr. Wade had wanted me to be his lawyer is because of my nationality. I heard him saying some Italians don't practice law, they make deals.
So what you're saying is that he was trying to get some sort of agreement out of this, rather than taking it to court?
Yes, he had believed he had as good of a chance of a fair trial as a Jewish man in Germany during the Hitler regime. Which was true, but not for the reason he believed. After his request to run on a racial defense was denied, he had disappeared for a while.
Now, what exactly do you mean he disappeared?
I mean that no one knew where he went. I wasn't informed, nor the judge. His family and co-workers didn't know. He had just vanished. This is when I requested to be replaced as his lawyer. Lucky for me, my wish was granted.
Wade was not the only man to blame, however. Former Mayor John Nicrelli could be held accountable. The city was informed about the dumping, and isn't it a mayor's job to know what is happening in his city?
I'm here with Mayor Nicrelli, the former mayor of Chester when the Wade dump fire took place. Mayor Nicrelli, what do you remember about the events leading up to the fire?
Well, I knew it was a tire recycling center, but I had no idea about the sort of things that were going on there at the time.
What about the records where DER agents informed the city about what was going on, and the city's solicitor Chakrabarty actually inspected the site himself?
Well, there's no way to prove that Chakrabarty was actually at the site before the incident occurred. There's no record of that.
But the DER made files of the site being available to the city long before the fire took place. I mean, surely you had some sort of idea.
Well, like I said before, I had no idea the things going on at the Wade site.
Well, wasn't it your job as mayor to know the things going on in your city?
This interview's over.
State officials in 1977 ordered Wade and ABM to cease activities and clean the property. Dumping stopped, but Wade and ABM said they had no money to clean up the site and later filed for bankruptcy. Cleanup costed millions of dollars, but the site is now considered safe. While the site is now safe, there has been irreparable atrocities committed against these families. We can only hope that justice will be served and that these families can attempt to piece their lives together through this trial.
Thank you for watching UDN, and I'm Michael Cummins.
And I'm Samantha Singer. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. for more information.
Thank you for watching.